what this is the picture I see of us in the last part of the first part of time of trouble, like just before we end up fleeing to the wilderness, after no buy, no sell. And so I'm sharing it to let you know what we're up against, but also to be thinking that direction. But where we left off was talking about, okay, what about that nice home, okay, set up in alternate energy comfort? For something's going to happen to that. Okay, maybe we're going to be forced to move. Maybe there's going to be some natural disaster that takes it out. Maybe we're going to get raided and it's going to get destroyed. But what I see, is it's not going to be there, because if it was, it wouldn't be called abject poverty. And so my point here is, maybe we shouldn't put so much focus on trying to get that set up if we're going to lose it anyway. Right. Okay? Solar systems, they're really nice, but they're also very expensive, and they're getting cheaper, and they're very fragile. Okay, when we went out looking for property, we saw one piece of property that had this very elaborate and very nice solar system set up, but you know what? It was non-functional. And the people were still living there. They just learned how to live without power, because that was easier than trying to fix the solar system. Go figure, okay? That taught me a huge lesson. Think about other alternate energy. I think a hydroelectric's a little bit more straightforward and so on if you happen to have that to work. But I'm going to hold off on taking hands just for a little bit, because we need to cover a little bit of ground. And we're getting late. I'm sorry. I really like letting you all speak.
Blame me.
Okay, I'll blame Titus. You can blame him too. He said so. If you were living, let me just ask a question here. If you were living in abject poverty, what would you be living in? Okay, yeah, maybe a shack. What do a lot of other homeless live in though? A tent. And so I'm going to go with a tent. Yeah, you might end up in something less or something more, but I'm just going to picture a tent. We invited you all to come over and see our tent. Okay, is there anybody here who has not been over and visited our tent? Okay, then let's go over there to the front porch of our tent right now. All right? To abject poverty. Okay, maybe so. I'm going to say something right at the very front of this. Okay, those of you over there, kind of come around this way a little bit here so you can kind of see down here. Don't compare this with your home. If you do, you're going to miss the whole point. Don't compare this with your home. Compare this with the tent you would be living in now if you had to flee now. Okay, in other words, the tent some of you stayed in or are staying in this weekend. Compare this with that. We started thinking about this, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago. I remember it being in connection with a seminar we did down in the LA Basin once. A friend of ours went down there with us, and before we went down, I know we had this conversation. He gave a talk on it. And this is actually part of my closing remarks I'm wanting to say. But we were thinking, okay, at that point, neither one of us had a place out in the country. And so we were thinking we might end up going to somebody else's place in the country that they already had. And when we showed up at their place, just thinking about the whole bearing fruit, God wanting us to be productive ideas, we decided we wanted to be an asset rather than a liability when we got there. And shelter's number one, right? So what could we take to have our own shelter when we got to somebody else's place? And the first thing that came to mind was an RV. Okay? I mean, yes, just in our thinking, the first thing that came to mind is an RV. and that might come to some of your minds. But the problem with RVs is they are designed, or they are not designed, really, for off the grid. I mean, they are off the grid because they're not necessarily plugged in, and they can go a certain length of time without being plugged in, but you can't go indefinitely without being plugged in. All right, you have to have electricity to recharge that battery somehow, and you have to have propane. And so they're not really designed for long-term off the grid. And we decided, we realized we need something that we could heat and cook with wood. And so I started thinking, okay, what would work? And I came up with 3 options: the teepee, a wall tent, and a yurt. Okay? The teepee and the yurt, native peoples have lived in those things for a long, long time. And so we got a teepee first off because that was the cheapest of the 3 options. And thinking, okay, I got a fire in the middle, but the teepee doesn't work for me. I mean, you'll see how tall I am, and the teepee's like this, and so I could only stand up in the middle of it, and that's right where the fire was. It just didn't work. So I have a teepee. If anybody's interested, talk to me afterwards. I think for some people that might be the answer. However, and then we started looking at yurts, and most of the yurts that are available on the market are made for pretty much semi-permanent setup. They're not made for portability. Since then, they've come up with other yurts they call camping yurts, which are much more portable. But anyway, we just haven't gone that direction yet. Not sure that we will. And also in my past, I worked for a mining company, and the mine was out in central Nevada. And just in connection with all of that, I did some research into the old mining camps and whatever. And I kept seeing these pictures of the old mining camps, and they basically had a wall tent like this that they started out with. And then next to it, you'd see another tent like this, but somebody had built a platform, like a deck, and set it up on the deck. Or they would go up and have a knee wall, maybe this high, a wall which sticks it up so you have, full height all the way out to the eaves. And then next to that would be another cabin where they had added some roofing to it, and then siding. And next thing you know, you've turned one of these into a little cabin. And so that's why we decided to go ahead and go with the wall tent. This technology is all available. It's not very common, but it is available. There's all sorts of accessories for these. You get them with a stove jack. Most of them come with a stove jack, which is a place for the stovepipe to go through, and so you can have a wood stove in there. Like we were talking, if it's too hot, I have it inside simply because that's the easiest, which this time of year I wouldn't. If we were setting up out here, I'd bring the stove outside to cook on, and that way you're not heating up the shelter. But we've played with these, I don't know, for a couple of years now, doing our programs in the fall and winter, and the wood stove warms them up real nice.
How much do they cost, the wood stove right now?
This particular wood stove, I got it through Sportsman's Guide. A friend of mine has the membership already, so I didn't have to pay for that. And we got it when they were offering free shipping. But for some reason I had to pay tax, even though it's across state lines.
California, they nail you first.
Yeah, I know. They get you coming and going.
You should have bought it here in Kentucky.
I should have, yeah, but it's a long ways to Kentucky, and that costs more than the tax. Anyway, I think I paid like $215, $16 or something like that for it. Now this is like the smallest model of tent stove that I know of. We have not, like I said earlier, we just got, or told some of you anyway, we just got this tent before we started this tour, basically. And so I haven't had a chance to try this stove in this tent in the winter, all right? However, I have another, an old tent that I've played with on our place. It's an old, like an 8x10. This is a 10x12. And it has the ridge running the opposite direction, rather than lengthwise, it's going widthwise. And this is a tent I've had like for 35 years, and I wanted to play with the floor platform and the knee wall, and so I would have had to cut the floor out of the tent and so on. And I figured, well, this old tent, if the experiment doesn't work, I haven't lost a whole lot. And so I went ahead and played with that, built a platform as part of one of our programs, and then between that program and the next program we did, Becky and I built the knee wall and a wood frame, and then cut the floor out of the tent and draped it over and just took the staple gun to it all the way around and pulled a door out of an old mobile home that's on the place and made a door for it. And I put this stove, I actually got this stove for that tent. And we could go, at the end of the meeting, this is November, so it's fairly late and cold by the time the meeting's done, and go into my tent, fire up the wood stove, and that place would be toasty in like 15 minutes or less. And so I think, they're rated. I mean, there's people that live in these kind of tents up in northern Canada and Alaska year-round. And so they rate the stove for being able to warm the tent up at, say, 30 and 40 below. And I don't think this stove would heat this tent at that kind of temperature, but I think on the kind of temperature, cold winter temperatures that we get in California and y'all have here, maybe where it's just down in the teens or whatever, I think this stove could handle it. So
that and a warm sleeping bag you can find.
Yeah, might have to get up a few times and restock it, but that would keep us warm. And what I'm discovering is the older I get, the more I appreciate fire.
Heat therapy.
Yeah.
I'll put in an extra wood stove.
Now,
I just have one question.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, let's take a few questions and we'll.
The stove pipe at the top. What is that around it to keep it from?
What's on the top? They call that a.
Inside and out, so it doesn't catch fire.
Okay, you'll have to come around here to see what I'm pointing to. But over the top of the stovepipe, there's a cap, which is it's called a rain cap.
Right.
And also on the inside of the rain cap, I had to put that in, is a screen, which, yes, keeps the birds out, but more importantly, it's a spark arrestor. Okay?
Inside the tent?
Inside the tent, okay. Where it goes, where the stovepipe goes through the tent, that's called a stove jack. And that is a piece of fiberglass material that's impregnated with something to keep it waterproof.
Does it come with your stove kit?
It comes with the tent. Most of these tents, if you order them, they come with a stove jack. The question they're going to ask you is, do you want a 4-inch, a 5-inch, or a 6-inch opening, depending on what size stove you want. And so you need to put the two together. A lot of the people that sell these tents also sell the stoves. The main people that are buying these tents are the people in the northern Rocky Mountain states, the outfitters that take hunters out to this hunting camp that they've set up way out in the sticks, and they use these kind of tents regularly. And since there's enough of those type people still already doing that, these tents are still in production.
What do they cost?
How much is the tent?
Oh, I was waiting for that question. This particular setup here, Becky and I both kind of added it up, and she comes up with a lower figure than I have. Anyway, somewhere between $1,400 and $1,600, $1,800, somewhere in there.
Well, that's way less than the yurts.
That's, way less than the yurts.
Real expensive.
Yeah. Now, I have to tell you a story with that, though. We have a larger one of these that we actually got as a result of our thinking, 4 or 5 years ago. And that was too big to set up for a weekend or something like that. And so we knew this tour was coming, and so due to some generous donations, we were able to buy this one here, which is a little more portable to bring along. We were actually wanting to get the size smaller for the sake of portability, but the tent company people talked us into getting this size, and I'm really glad they did, because we would be much more cramped in the smaller one, and that would present a bad picture to you all looking at it. If you can see, oh, that's workable. So anyway, they have these in smaller, one size smaller, which would be an 8 by 10, and then many sizes bigger. I mean, you can get a 16 by 20 and larger. Okay, there's one family that comes to the programs we have in California regularly. They have, I think it's a 14 by 16, which is spacious. Okay, like three times this, I think. But they have a larger family. So anyway, the main reason I'm bringing this here just so that you can get the idea. The other thing that goes with this, though, I have this set up to demonstrate the no buy, no sell lifestyle we've been talking about. We have no electricity. We can operate totally off the grid. We need a water source, okay? But these are easy to get. You can get these at Walmart, right? And you got water. You notice the bucket on the stove. So I have hot water, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit later, hopefully, or maybe I won't because I'm talking about it now, about gearing up for abject poverty. And right now I'm thinking of these little shanty towns around many of the third world countries, the cities in third world countries, right? Those people make that lifestyle work because they have certain pieces of equipment that most of the average person now here in America doesn't have. And top of that list here is probably one of these, okay? We had to get this through Lehman's because they're not that not common. I understand you all have a store around here which you can buy these things. We have a couple, Becky and I have a couple other wash basins, but this is the one we like the best because it's big enough to do more things in, but it's not so big that it's hard to pack around like a wash tub, okay? You need a way to wash. People in those third world shanty towns, they need a place to wash. And this is it. We could wash your body in it. You could put your kid in here and bathe him. You can wash clothes in here if you have to, and so on. And so, you know, and it's the last seminar somebody pointed out, and it's not plastic, right? You want to buy quality, something's going to last. My daughter has a stainless steel one, which I would actually prefer to have, but I couldn't find one at the time we were buying it. So we got this, which was next best. I think the stainless steel would be better yet. So if you could find the stainless steel, that's where I would aim you to.
The Mennonites sell all kinds of things.
Yeah, mountain store.
Anything you want in stainless steel.
Yeah. Yeah. Our load might be heavier going home. Yeah, Tim was telling us about it, and we're like, we got to go to the store. Anyway, yeah, y'all are blessed with this kind of stuff in your country here. So, you know, you might help hook some of us in the other parts of the country up.
In Kentucky,
That's right.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said, there's still room for you to move here to Kentucky if you want.
Well, talk to the boss about it.
There's also solar showers that you can buy that you just fill them with hot water, put them in the sun.
Oh,
they
the
do
solar
deteriorate over years or whatever, but we used that when we were up in Idaho, up in the
Sure.
mountains. And we didn't have a way to shower, so I put one out, and it got super hot. I had to actually add cold water to it.
Yeah.
And at the time, the children were, Aaron was 5 and Crystal was 7, and there was one bag did all 3 of us because we got wet, shut the water off, and
Right.
that way.
Yeah.
And so, and then Harlan made a makeshift shower stall with wood that he had, but he put black plastic around it, so that kept it warmer. And we were there until November, and we finally had to go because we just there were some things not set up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is a light. I really wasn't impressed with these when we first got it, but I've gotten to love them. These are just little simple solar lights, and this will collapse to make less space for when you're packing. And they make, I mean, you saw our porch light on here last night, maybe, I don't know.
You know, I saw them on whatever, you got it off.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw them and I almost bought them.
Now, just for the record or whatever, okay, Becky and I both appreciate showers. However, the whole time we've been here, we've just taken sponge baths with this just because it's easier to do this than to get all our stuff together and walk over somewhere else and take the shower, okay? And so this works. I remember a story about Adventist history, and I think it's in that book called God's Farm. And some of you have seen that. I think it's in that book. But anyway, it's talking about the early days of Walla Walla College over in Washington. And the people there at the school wrote to the general conference and was basically asking them funds to put in a shower at the end of the dormitory. And what they wrote back was detailed instructions on how to do a sponge bath. You know, in the old days, you'd go into a motel room and there would be a wash basin and the pitcher of water, right? That was common practice back then. You know, and who are we to think we're so special we deserve a hot shower every day, right? So this works. Okay, it works. I went on a mission trip once, and they had this shower where this is another thing that works for showers. You get a bucket or some kind of a container with a spigot on the bottom, and you fill it up with nice warm water, and you stick it up on something, and then you get underneath and you turn it on and get wet, and then soap up, and then turn it on and rinse off. That's something that's easy to rig up also. And they had this, like this, one compound for the guys and one for the girls with shelves all the way around where you could go take a shower there. And at the end of we were building stuff, and at the end of the day I was just too tired to go through all that process and go traipse and clear across camp and go do that. And I had a bucket, and I just went and got some hot water and went in my tent and did a sponge bath, washed my hair and everything for the whole mission trip, just because it was easier. And I felt I was actually cleaner than I would have been trying to take a shower with my swimsuit on. I never have figured that one out. Anyway, we have the cots in here. I think one of the main reasons I like the cot, it's a nice place to sleep, but it also gives you a place for storage underneath.
Keeps you up off the ground.
Okay. Yeah, it gets you up off the ground. The table, we forgot our table when we left, and we got to Arizona and we're like, we don't have our table. Did you put it in? No, I thought you put it in. I put one of those, right? And we're like, oh, we got to have a table. And so we actually had two smaller tables. We were going to bring both of them. And so we went down to the hardware store, the closest town out there in Arizona desert. And this was like the best option. And both of us are feeling like, wow, that was a blessing in disguise, because this table size, it just fits there really nicely. It's so much nicer to have one big table than trying to squeeze everything on a couple little tables. And anyway, we're really happy with this particular setup. So remember the rooftop cabin that the woman built for Elijah, or no, it was Elisha, with a bed, a table, a lampstand.
Just a minimum.
Yeah. And so, you're making like a prophet's cabin, right? But it's workable. Okay? And this is like simple and off the grid and whatever. Now, can I hold on to your questions for a minute? Because I'm afraid I'm going to forget to say this, because I already forgot before. Last winter, we're pushing this idea, and that's why we have this here to show you all, okay? This doesn't have to be a tent. Okay, it could be a little cabin. But the main thing I'm trying to illustrate here is the lifestyle that goes with it, and how you can have everything you really need in this. Yes, you need an outhouse somewhere, okay, and you need a water source and the garden and stuff, that's a given, okay? But like the water source and the outhouse, and then what you have here makes it work, okay? And again, whether it's a tent or a cabin, whatever, doesn't matter. But it's the lifestyle that we've gotten away from that was very common back in the 1800s.